The March 6, 2023 session of the Anne Arundel County Council is called to order. Please silence all electronic devices at this time. Ms. Rodvian will lead the invocation.
Let us rise each day and strive each day to do only that which brings happiness and joy to others, and avoid doing things that cause others hurt and pain. Let us use our minds and our reason to foster behavior based on the mutuality and reciprocity inherent in human relationships, and let us always respect the dignity and worth of each other. And let us, above all, love one another, not to obtain rewards for ourselves now or hereafter, or to avoid punishment, but rather always to bring each other contentment and peace. So be it. And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Secretary, please read the ethics statement.
Do you have the presentation?
You know what? I do, actually. I saw your name and it jumped in my head twice, as you were. Ms. Rodvian will recognize several members of the public.
Yes, I'm really excited. I'll do this as quickly as possible because I know we have a very full agenda, but bravery like the one I'm about to describe is definitely worth acknowledging. So I'll call these heroines up in just a moment, but tonight we'll be acknowledging Monique Richard, Patty Brady, Corinne McHale, and Barb Ambrose. And this is a letter from a constituent, which I think tells the story very well, so I'm just going to read the letter straight through. I was unknowingly robbed today while shopping at Trader Joe's in Annapolis. I was coming from physical therapy and decided I could go without crutches to shop. Big mistake. I limped pretty badly when walking without crutches and definitely became a target. A Trader Joe's employee named Monique ran up to me and asked if I was missing anything in my purse. I looked and my wallet was gone. She took off running. I started my version of an extremely slow run out the doors and called 911. Other female Trader Joe's employees just took off running after him. Another female employee jumped in her car to try and find him. The manager, who also tried to run after him, came back to me while I was on the phone with 911. The two of them were able to describe the man who stole my wallet in great detail to the 911 operator. Meanwhile, the two other ladies were still chasing him, one on foot and one in a car. About 10 minutes later, the two employees start walking back, waving my wallet in the air with huge smiles on their faces. It was truly amazing. These women chased this man down past the construction where Macaroni Grill used to be, yelling, "Thief, thief!" No one else stopped to help. The woman in the car pulled up and blocked him and then grabbed him. And then one grabbed him. He said he ditched the wallet. These bad, can I say ASS in the council meeting? These bad women caught him, grabbed by his arms, and made him walk them to the spot where he ditched the wallet. While talking to the police, we figured out that a woman shopper was the decoy. She was definitely acting weird and bumped into me. I was annoyed and got a weird feeling about her, so I moved out of the way. She was acting odd, coming towards me again. She got my attention by asking me about what was in this frozen meal. She acted as if she barely knew English, had a large hoodie covering a lot of her. As I started to walk away, she asked me another question, so I was now facing her while reading the label. Then I actually was upset with myself for being annoyed when someone needed help. Another big mistake. The man and the woman were definitely working together. None of my cards were stolen. I think $60 in cash, but I will take that over everything in my wallet, including all of my daughter's things. So at this time, I would like to invite down these four wonderful women, Monique, Patty, Corinne, and Monique, Patty, Corinne, and Barb to come down. We have is it just two of you? Just one. Okay, well, we'll take one. The Distinguished Citizen Award presented to Barb Ambrose, the
Yeah, there we got him. She gave out one here recently. I think I do want to say, and what was her name again? The one you, Barbara. So Anne Arundel County Police is hiring. We have they have some vacancies, and I'm sure that they can use your skill, unique set of skills that you have. So thank you. And I know we do have from the city of Annapolis, Alderman Schennemeyer here in the audience as well. Just wanted to recognize him, and then former county council person who is over there in the corner and always a troublemaker. And so it's John Grasso. So thank you all for being here. Madam Secretary, please read the ethics statement.
The Ethics Commission has asked that I advise you that under certain circumstances, members of the public may qualify as lobbyists when they testify before the County Council. If so, the law requires that certain information be filed with the Ethics Commission. The chair of the Ethics Commission has asked that those who wish to testify in any form review the general information on lobbying sheet located on the Ethics website under Forms and Publications. If there are any questions about lobbying requirements, please contact the Ethics Commission at 410-222-4413.
We will now open our invitation to the audience. Madam Secretary, did we receive any testimony through the online testimony tool?
We did not receive anything ahead of time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We will now hear from individuals who signed up ahead of time. On that list, please come up. Remember, we're going to have 2 minutes. Please state your name and record name and address for the record. The first person we're going to have up is Tracy Matthews, Luis de Conciao, okay, and then Catherine Mangum, Michael Mangum, and Kurt Stevenson. So if they can come up to the chair in that order. Trace, Miss Matthews, is that Italian? Is that what it is? Last name? Yeah. Portuguese, okay. Mangum, and Stevenson, okay. Oh yeah, I always want to say Stevenson. Tracy Matthews. She's not here, okay. Luis.
Good evening, council members. My name is Louis, and I am a resident of District 7, and have met some of you personally and spoken. Oh, thank you. And spoken with others on phone and corresponded by email. I'm a representative of the greater community of Riva. Recently, a group of this community emailed a letter to council members Ledbetter, Hummer, and Rodvin. In the letter, we stated as a community, we are aware of sports betting facilities having been proposed in Maryland, and that the county recognizes the potential social and economic benefits of sports betting, but also acknowledges that the activity can have negative impacts, and the proximity of sports betting facilities to residential areas is expected to increase the risk of traffic, crime, gambling addiction, and decrease property values, as well as other problems. That being said, the county is also committed to promoting health, safety, and welfare of its residents. We urge changes to Article 18 of Anne Arundel Zoning Code. We believe this is the best course of action to protect our community and others like us. Now is the time for the county to make careful strategic decisions so that Anne Arundel County can continue to be the best place for all. We would like to propose changes to commercial zoning such that sports betting not be allowed in C1 and C2. Sports betting should be conditional use for C3 and C4 only. We'd also urge that if there be any auxiliary use classifications for sports betting, the use shall be located at least 1,000 feet from the nearest lot line of an existing residential dwelling, school bus stop, library, park, religious facility, or video gaming facility. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Catherine?
Thank you. I'm Catherine Mangum. We live at 652 Pinewood Drive, and we just wanted to bring to your attention some letters that we've sent to the county, mostly because we haven't received a response from anyone about any of this correspondence as of this date. So we've lived at 652 Pinewood for just about 20 years. We're experiencing some problems with the neighbor, some issues regarding poisoning of animals and cutting down of trees, essentially deforesting the area. We've contacted the Anne Arundel County Zoning and Enforcement and the Department of Natural Resources back in August. No answer. We included Mr. Pittman and Ms. Rodvian on the distribution of our email. No answer. We communicated again on March 26th back to the same people, the county executive, our representative, Ms. Rodvian, and Mr. Pittman's assistants, essentially. No answer. We identified there in that letter that we had contacted the office back in August. We're concerned about the embankment areas on Pinewood Drive. It's starting to collapse due to erosion. Numerous other areas that have been deforested and the trees and vegetation removed from this whole area. We've sent this information up and no response as of yet. Last week on March 3rd, we sent another letter, same people essentially, identified that we've reached out to the county executive and to our representative here, Ms. Rodvian. We've communicated to the Department of Inspections and Permits, inquiring how a resident in Anne Arundel County can clear in excess of 13,000 square feet of property without the appropriate permits. And now the clearing is causing the embankment along Pinewood Drive and the county and state easement to collapse from erosion and run off because of that deforestation. So there's a steep buffer area on our property all around our whole area. And the steep buffer area along the property was not to be disturbed. I think that was my time up.
Yeah, please summarize. Thank you for your testimony.
Okay.
I have some
Mr.
exhibits I'd like to give out to the council. My name is Michael Mangum. I live at 652 Pinewood Drive, and like my wife said, we've lived there for about approximately 20 years. We're reaching out to the council because we're getting no help anywhere else. We have placed the county on notice that we intend to sue. Litigation should be filed this month. Basically, as you see in these photos here, we live in a very wooded area that's very concentrated with wildlife, of every kind, deer, everything. In 20-some years we've lived there, we've never seen dead animals. But this gentleman here has poisoned the land, poisoned the waterway, cleared the forest, and as you can see from two of those photos, one is from the street, you can't even see the houses, the dense forestry that's there. And then you see the picture next to it where he's cleared all the property. We came back from our home in Florida in May or June of last year, and it was like we came to a different neighborhood. I mean, I had to take a double take. I was breathless at what he did to the property and land. Now, there's steep buffer zones on there that was placed when this was developed. It was supposed to be never disturbed. And those steep buffers now are starting to slide into the culvert. And it's going to start eventually threatening the structures there. And we're going to start seeing Calvert County, California, on Pinewood Drive sliding into Calvert. These are very steep Calvert. And out on the easement, there's a 50-foot easement on Pinewood Drive that's owned by the state and the county. He's cleared all that property too, that is now causing Pinewood Drive to dip, causing the culvert to slide into the culvert. And the county inspector comes out and goes, well, I don't think he cleared 5,000 square feet. And I told him, well, you need to come back and put your glasses on. And you need to have a second look. And as you can remember from my liquor board bout, I'm not going to let this go. I am going to take this if I have to, just like with the liquor board, all the way to the Court of Appeals if I have to. And, this is your rules, your laws. This county imposed it, on this property when it was developed. This guy came in here, totally destroyed it, and the county's doing nothing, absolutely nothing. And I've heard nothing from anybody.
Thank you. Mr. Kurt?
Hi, my name is Kurt Svensson. There's no T in it.
I know.
It happens all the time. I live in Arnold. Tonight, I'm introducing the first of a 5-part series. I did submit something online. I don't know what happened. Called an FY24 Comprehensive Budget Primer. This highlights the policies and assumptions the council ought to be involved in even before now. The keys to truly understanding the budget that will be dropped on May 1st, and how to truly understand how a true understanding is impossible without more transparency in the process and the provision of key missing data. As members of the legislative branch in approving budgetary policies and understanding the budget you approve, this is among the most important of your responsibilities, a fundamental check and balance. This role has a history of not being effectively carried out. Furthermore, the citizen's role, which is provided for in the charter, is adhered to the letter. Unfortunately, the intended level of citizen input and ability to truly understand the budget is non-existent in any real sense. I suggest to you the citizens know this all too well. It lies at the root of the mistrust and anger that so often erupts. The council consists of both the minority and majority parties, uniquely positioned to be the citizens' champion. The county council has complete authority over the level of appropriation requested, proposed, and approved for the legislative branch. You can and should request and ensure the approval of adequate staffing and funding to ensure this branch of government effectively forms this budgetary role and can partner with the executive branch in truly engaging all citizens. This budgetary analysis I'm talking about does not require a CPA and is not a core competency of an auditor. The auditor's staff should continue to play a role in the budget review, but differently skilled staff should direct and manage it. Please read the attachment to my written testimony. I'll make sure it gets available to you. And check out my Google site called AA County Citizen Share. It is there. Thank you.
Thank you. You all may be seated. Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in here who wishes to speak? Please come up, state your name and address and your topic before making your remarks, and remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. Mr. Grasso?
My turn. Never thought I'd be on this side of the dais, right? I got to say that I'm disheartened. Okay, I'm saddened. All right, as a councilman, okay, and each one of you folks that were up there, you went door to door asking people to support you, door to door. Okay, and you were friendly and you asked them to vote for you, but I didn't see one of you get down here and talk to this crowd. Not one of you. I know Pete will do it, Chairman, because him and I used to tag team all the time and come down there. So if you spend as much time as you did going door to door, then each one of you should be ashamed of yourself for not coming down here and talking to these people. They're not here because they're happy, most of them. They got a problem. And the only way they're going to find that out is if you get down there and talk to them face to face. I know myself personally that I've changed my vote several times by just coming down here and talking to the people. So if you had the energy to go door to door, then show the same energy down here in the respect to the people that actually pay your salary, and that is the taxpayers. You don't come up here 5 minutes before the dog and pony show and sit up here. You need to be out here 15, 20 minutes before and greet every one of these people like I used to do at each door and be grateful that they actually voted for you. Because to be an elected into the position is an honor. We seem to forget that sometimes, okay? And I never forgot it. And I tell you, the 8 years that I had was the most happiest time in my life, and I was honored to be the councilman. I would ask you folks to do the exact same thing and show the respect to these people that they deserved, like they gave you the day to vote. Another issue that really bothers me, that's dragged me out of retirement, is I have to speak to Ms. Rodovan. I heard your name mentioned 3 times with an email about environmental situations. I know your predecessor, Chris Trumbauer, would have personally jumped out of his seat if he would have read the emails that you got. And why in the world you would not respond to your constituents on those kind of situations is beyond me, okay? You got reelected again. The question is, do you really want the position? And if you don't want the position, then step down and let your party put somebody else in there. Otherwise, I ask you to respect your taxpayers, the people that are paying your salary, and respond to the emails. Everyone's entitled to missing 1, but you got 3. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Smith, may I
Please.
just take a moment? I searched through my emails and I have indeed responded. And several of the emails that were purportedly addressed to me were actually addressed to other people with my name as a carbon copy. So I just wanted to let the record reflect that I have indeed responded. And if there needs to be more direct communication, I will send a copy back to you so you can see my response, since it seems like it's escaped your memory.
Thank you. Next, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Richard Fredericks. I reside at 203 Severn River Road in Severna Park, Maryland. And I actually bring a compliment. I registered to give testimony this evening for two reasons. The first is to request that you enact the contemplated accessory dwelling unit
Sir,
ordinance.
That's one of the topics on the agenda today.
Yes,
is there
sir.
something else that's
I'm
as far as
trying to
remarks?
influence your vote.
Okay.
Thank
well,
you.
Well, during the that bill, we're actually going to have public testimony. So if you wanted to speak
Forgive
specifically
me.
to that one, definitely come up.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm going to repeat that message.
Please do.
But there's a compliment coming.
Okay.
Not now. You'll have to wait.
Roger that. We'll do.
Thank you.
We'll wait for the commercial to get over with and hear the
Thank
end of
you.
the story. Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Kate Fox. I live at 34. Oh, thank you, Matt. 3495
sorry.
Olympia Road in Davidsonville. I'm on the boards of Davidsonville Area Civic Association and the Growth Action Network. First of all, I'd also like to give a compliment to Laura Corby. You have a genuine administrator. First and foremost, she's prompt to respond to any email I ask. Second, any question I ask by email, excuse me. She's also knowledgeable about most aspects of county government and is always professional and businesslike. Thank you, Laura. Second, Gann understands that the council is reviewing the rules by which the council operates and may be making some changes in the next few months. One is to make council meetings hybrid, allowing citizens to testify remotely. Gann supports this change and for nearly a year has been following the process of making the council meetings hybrid, from the equipment being on back order to installation of the equipment during the August recess, to fine-tuning the audio after the equipment was installed, only to find out just before the November recess that legislation was needed to allow hybrid meetings. One might wonder why this legislation was not drafted once the equipment was installed. Regardless, we are still asking you to fast-track this legislation now, while still working on the remaining rules changes. Having hybrid meetings is good government because it allows greater cross-section of the county to share views on bills, or on other issues that can be brought up during general testimony, like now. It will enable working people with busy schedules and cannot get to council meetings, parents with children who might need a babysitter to come to testify in person, and disabled or older people who cannot get out at night to participate in the rulemaking for the county. We urge you please to introduce legislation as soon as possible to allow hybrid meetings and thus enable more county residents to participate in county government. Thank you for your consideration for fast-tracking hybrid meetings.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Matt Minahan, 3651 First Avenue, Edgewater, Maryland. I'm this year's chair of the Growth Action Network. And three matters we'd like to encourage the council to take action on. First of all, what Kate said about Laura, I would definitely underscore that. On hybrid meetings, we hope you would revert to the best practices during the pandemic, when we were able to have meetings online. You were able to invite people from all around the county all the time to join in these meetings, and parents didn't have to finish homework early and run dinner early and try to find a bus to get here, and someone to take care of the children and spend an entire evening waiting to speak for 2 minutes. So we urge you please to pass whatever needs to be passed to create hybrid meetings for the council as soon as you possibly can. Second matter is we believe the job of being a part-time citizen legislator is enormously difficult, given the breadth of issues before the council, the density of the code, the density of the technical matters that need to be understood and navigated. We would encourage the council to consider hiring a researcher consultant who can collect information from other counties and states on best practices that can inform your legislation as you draft it. It would also help inform citizens about what's behind your legislation, why it's needed, what problem it's intended to address, and what other jurisdictions are doing about it. So we would encourage you to consider creating a position as a researcher consultant. And finally, particularly with Mr. Grasso here, I was a big supporter of his bill, his school's APF bill, creating a 95% limit on schools enrollment. And I'm understanding that that gets sunset in a couple of months, and we hope that you not only extend it for a few months, but that you extend it for 5 years or make it permanent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Ma'am?
Mr. Grasso.
So I misunderstood the instruction. I'm on the agenda for later, I think, to talk about the ADU law?
Yes.
Okay, so,
Thank you. Please return to your seat. Last call for anyone that needs to testify for anything that's not on the printed agenda. You have 2 minutes. If not, seeing no movement, the invitation to audience is now closed. Is there any item any council member would like to place on the agenda? All right, I want to call up Pete Barron from the admin. I think he has a few comments for us as well.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the council. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to make a quick comment. Before you is Resolution 2-23. The administration is asked the council administrator and this body to withdraw it. There was a procedural hiccup, and we will be bringing forward a new resolution at the appropriate time, but because of the procedure not being followed on our end, we spotted it just after we introduced the resolution. So apologies for wasting council staff's time, but ask that you withdraw that resolution tonight.
Okay. Resolution number 223 has been withdrawn. May I have a motion that the partial reading of any bill, resolution, amendment to a bill or resolution or minutes constitutes the reading of the whole?
So moved, Allison Pickard.
A second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Madam Secretary, please read the minutes of February 21st, 2023.
The county council meeting was called to order by Chair Smith at 7 p.m. It was opened with the invocation given by Ms. Fiedler and was followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Madam Secretary, please read. 1 second here. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of February 21st, 2023? A second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. The minutes of February 21st, 2023 stand approved as read. Madam Secretary, please read the titles of any bills to be introduced this evening.
Bill number 1623, an ordinance concerning public ethics. Bill number 1723, an ordinance concerning payment in lieu of taxes, the Villages at Marley Station, Glen Burnie, Maryland amendment. Bill number 1823, an ordinance concerning planning and development, master plan for water supply and sewerage system. Bill number 1923, an ordinance concerning public safety, ban the Bag Act of Anne Arundel County.
Madam Secretary, please read the titles of any resolutions to be introduced this evening.
Resolution number 323, resolution approving the determination of certain improved county-owned property at the corner of Yellow Springs South and Y Mills South in Laurel, Maryland as surplus property. Resolution number 423, resolution approving the determination of certain improved county-owned property near Eagle Harbor South in Laurel, Maryland as surplus property.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 323.
Bill number 323, an ordinance concerning zoning, small business districts, religious facilities, outside storage.
All right, Mr. Barron. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While my team joins me, we have Kelly Kenny from Office of Law, Lynn Miller from OPZ, and I think that's Tom Burke walking up behind me. We've discussed this bill at a couple of meetings, including the February work session and the second February council meeting. Council amended the bill on the February 21st meeting to address an outside storage issue. As a reminder, this bill comes as a result of the county capital improvement project for pedestrian infrastructure in front of Jessup Elementary School. Happy to answer any questions, and we ask you pass the bill tonight. I think we're ready.
Okay. Is there any discussion on 323? Okay. We will now open the public hearing on bill number 323. Madam Secretary, did we receive any testimony through the online testimonial tool?
We did not receive anything ahead of time, Mr. Chair.
All right, we're now individuals who signed up ahead of time. I did not see any on the list. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on bill number 323? Present. All right, seeing no movement, the public hearing on bill 323 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 323.
Bill number 323, an ordinance concerning zonings, small business districts, religious facilities, outside storage.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing no lights. All right. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on bill number 323.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Ms. Hummer.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 323 has been passed.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 623.
Bill number 623, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development, zoning, accessory dwelling units.
Okay. Ms. Ravian?
So I don't suspect we need to go into a whole lot of detail already because we've discussed this bill at several meetings before, but basically it expands the county's current law that allows property owners to build an accessory dwelling unit either inside their primary residence or as a detached separate structure up to 800 square feet with a whole lot of parameters, but basically with the purpose of allowing elderly folks to age in place, allowing people with disabilities to stay close to their families, providing more housing options for veterans, young people moving to the area for whom the housing costs are quite alarmingly high. So to make any sort of dent in providing additional housing options and perhaps some that are affordable, being one of, in my opinion and experience after speaking with many folks about the topic, of an almost dire need in the county.
Oh, thank you.
And I ask for your support.
Mr. Barron, just briefly on the admin side.
Sure. Just with us for questions is Ms. Miller from OPZ, and we have Ms. O'Keefe from IMP tonight, and Ms. Kelly Kenny from the Office of Law. I'll reiterate or co-sign the sponsors' comments, and just happy to answer any questions. Understand there are going to be amendments, so we'll save our comments for that.
Okay. Any discussion? No? All right. We will now open the public hearing on bill number 623. Madam Secretary, did we receive any testimony through the online testimonial tool?
Yes, we did, Mr. Chair. We received about 13 submissions of testimony. There was an email and a letter circulated as well.
Okay. So we'll now hear from individuals who signed up ahead of time for 623. Again, please come to the front podium here, the table, state your name and address for the record, and then 2 minutes. First is Mr. Fredericks, Mr. Miller, Ms. Stanton, Kurt, and Brooke Schandelmeyer. All right, Mr. Fredericks.
Thank you. Good evening. My name again, Richard Fredericks. I reside at 203 Severn River Road, Severna Park, Maryland. I had registered to give testimony this evening for 2 reasons. The first reason, to request that you enact the contemplated accessory dwelling unit ordinance as amended and as you have considered it, you and the county staff, and as supported by past witnesses. I believe Bill 6-23 has a lot of merit, and I thank you all for advancing it. The second point, I want to compliment you, all of you. Because of my interest in accessory dwelling units, I've reviewed many, many hours of your past council meetings and your workshops. And I was struck, as I am this evening, by the civil and thoughtful and responsible manner in which you meet your constituents and our county's responsibilities. Regrettably, I can think of many other legislative councils, including in Washington, D.C., and across our country, that could take a lesson from reviewing your council practice. So I thank you, and I do hope you will enact this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. We should have you come every council meeting and provide testimony.
Well, thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Good evening, Chairman Smith and distinguished council members. I'm Steve Miller, and I live at 613 Samantha Court, Annapolis, Maryland. I'm the president of a homeowners association in a cluster community of townhomes and single-family homes. Bill 6-23 has an impact on a community like mine and others that were designed without a requirement for minimum lot sizes and with a requirement for environmental site design for improved stormwater management. There are restrictions on adding decks, patios, and other hardscape structure, much less ADUs, on small lots often influenced by these two factors. We can't create more parking. Clusters have been designed with narrow roads that place some limits on street parking, as well as the use of garage space that's mandated by code or fire marshal directives. This bill seems to ignore the fact that clusters already created a denser neighborhood that in previous single-family home developments similarly zoned, and it now provides an opportunity to make it even more dense with the addition of ADUs. The question is, should some existing cluster developments be grandfathered or have some means of opting out of ADUs? This bill also has a significant impact on volunteer members of HOA boards. Private stormwater management systems in cluster developments and recurring county inspection force members to become civil engineers of sorts to fully understand their facilities and maintenance requirements. In 2021, Maryland House Bill 322 was adopted, which prohibits HOAs from imposing unreasonable limitations on owners wishing to install biohabitat gardens, pollinator gardens, rain gardens, and xeriscaping. Boards now need some knowledge of conservation landscaping to develop reasonable design guidelines. And now with Bill 6-23, boards will have to acquire even more knowledge to create new guidelines for acceptable architectural standards for ADUs in their association, as well as reviewing plans. Legislators and government officials expect HOA boards to help implement these laws in their communities, but neither has provided dedicated resource to help untrained volunteer members effectively navigate their way through this kind of legislation. It's time for the county to create a dedicated ombudsman position or an office to better support HOAs. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Thank you. Hello, my name is Melissa Stanton. I live on Wason Way in Davidsonville. First, 2 points of disclosure. One, just to let you know, I'm a friend of Lisa Rodvian's, and I have assisted her in her campaigns. And two, the things I'm going to say, I'm saying on behalf of myself, not on behalf of my employer, which happens to be AARP, which is a big supporter of ADUs. I'm a big supporter of an ADUs. In fact, for my job, I created an award-winning nationally distributed guide about ADUs. I have one copy here. But of great concern to me about the proposal is the unexpected new restriction that ADUs cannot be used for short-term rentals. I see that there is an amendment to that section of the legislation, and I do support that. I want just to say that this is a serious imposition on ADU homeowners, and it undermines the flexibility that an ADU provides. I myself have an attached ADU in a wing of my home. The apartment is used for multi-week or multi-month rentals. My guests are usually people who are visiting family or working in the area temporarily, such as in the state legislature or at the Naval Academy. I chose the short-term rental option because I don't want to take on the commitment and risk of a stranger making my home their full-time home. I also need to have access to the apartment for my own guests, and I expect to someday need the space for one of my adult children or for my elderly mother. I invested in the creation of the apartment knowing I would have these options. And ADUs are about options for families to be able to live together but separately, for homeowners, especially retirees who remain in their homes yet generate some income. And while some ADU owners do choose to become landlords, others prefer to be occasional innkeepers. Requiring that an ADU be used for long-term rental housing is changing the rules of the game that many of us are already playing. The proposed ban will be taking away a right, and I wouldn't be surprised if people, filed lawsuits about that. And as you know, the county benefits from ADUs. The occupancy taxes from them are going directly to the county. I'm sorry, for short-term rentals. My time is up. I just want to say, if one of the goals is to make ADUs help affordable housing in the area, communities do that by having the local government help create the ADUs, either as a subsidy for the construction costs or to subsidize the rental to keep the rent down.
Thank you.
To help the private homeowners.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sir?
My name is Kurt Svensson. I live in Arnold. I read in the paper the day after your last hearing on this bill an Annapolis resident referencing national data showing that when ADUs are permitted, there's not a great uptick in the number of units. And this led him to go on to say, I want you to go from just permitting them to promoting them. And I wholeheartedly support that sentiment. This is in sync with my earlier testimony, just as it is an obligation of both branches of county government to ensure the county's budget is capable of being understood by all citizens. It's also obliged to take extraordinary measures to ensure it is actually understood by a great many more citizens than is currently the case. This bill also presents an opportunity for you to demonstrate your ability to work in a unified, cross-partisan manner. When I shared my vigorously optimistic viewpoint towards this legislation, I was surprised at the level of anger some of my friends displayed. They feel as though a fundamental rule under which they invested in their homes has been radically shifted out from under them. They fear the potential increase in density and impact on parking and traffic in their community. The national experience noted above and pointing out that it's not going to result in one on every block has not erased those fears. Add to that the calls for the government to promote the development of ADUs, and the "oh, don't worry about it" argument begins to fall flat. But when I asked my friends, what if the number of ADUs in a given community was limited? They seemed to be appeased. I don't have a specific solution to offer. I have no expertise in this area. But I, and I dare say most of my fellow citizens, blue and red, do ask that you work together on this. Don't be content with a 4-vote victory. Please build relationships with one another. It may come in handy down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. My name is Alderman Brooks Shandelmeyer. I live on 21 Rockwell Court, Annapolis, Maryland. I was the primary sponsor of the Annapolis Accessory Dwelling Unit Bill, which passed in 2021. And I would just like to say that I actually got my start in the city of Annapolis living in a off-the-books one, as I like to call it. Because a family that provided me a safe, affordable place to live, had they been caught by a city inspector, would have been fined. And that is just silly to me. You guys look like you're going to actually have a better bill than the city of Annapolis is, so I do congratulate you on that. I just want to flag a couple potential issues that have happened in Annapolis that have hindered this. One thing is owner occupancy requirements. They do cut down on the amount of these that can get built, and they hurt the flexibility in financing. And the other big impediment to constructing these in Annapolis has been the requirement of a separate sewer a water sewer hookup. This can add $20,000 to $80,000 depending on the side of the lot. And because these are individual homeowners financing this, that can be very detrimental to their ability to have this built. Finally, I do want to reiterate something. Things like parking requirements or doubling down on setback requirements do prevent these from getting built. They add a very significant cost to homeowners and individual financiers. And allowing for short-term rentals increases the likelihood of a bank financing the operation, because the more flexibility you have with a property, the more likely the bank is to believe that they will get their investment back. Actually, when I lived in the off-the-books one, I rented month to month, which would have been technically considered a short-term rental under the city of Annapolis' standards. I don't know the counties. I apologize, so I can't talk on that. But allowing as much flexibility as possible for the use of these ensures that they are built, ensures that they are the best way for small homeowners to do their part to address the housing shortage. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you all in your testimony. And General Miller, I will definitely be in touch with you about the enhancements to the, certainly glad I had the opportunity to work for you in the past, and definitely appreciate your opinion on this. And so I'll definitely be in touch. Sir. Any other testimony or anyone would like to testify in reference to this bill, 623? Please come up at this moment before we close public testimony. Yeah, I couldn't see I was going to try to help you, but, oh yeah. Does it, it's not working, yeah. 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 All right, so please state your name and address for the record. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. Sir?
Yes, sir. My name is... Thank you. My name is Edward Urban. I live at 62 Hull Avenue, Annapolis, Maryland, 21403 in the community of Bay Ridge. Just have entirely too many issues with this legislation. It's just too broad. There's not enough specifics. It's directly going to affect our neighborhood in a big way. We are challenged right now with many of our lots at 5,000 square feet, 50 by 100 size lot. To put this dwelling, adding 800 square feet on a tiny lot like that it's ridiculous. And that's really where it starts. But there are a lot of issues with the way the law was put in, and you took all the specific stuff that you had in there. You had a property size limit of 14,000 square feet. Where did that go? Why? Other issues that I saw, parking spaces. Our community is old. We have parking spaces. The majority of our community is parking on the county right away. You're going to add an auxiliary dwelling unit. It's going to have another person drive down there. We don't have public transportation down in Bay Ridge. So you're going to have parking on even worse on the county right away. So you have the parking issue. But I think the real big factor is critical areas. You know, everyone up here is talking big time about critical areas. You're going to add 800 square feet to a critical area space? That just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I looked it over and it was so broad, it just frustrated me that I'd gotten all the specific stuff that was in there that I thought were somewhat safeguards were removed. And it looks like to me, the legislation is just painted very broadly, and historic communities are going to be affected. And the other thing is the time constraints. I mean, this is only, you all made these changes 2 weeks ago. Our community was hard pressed to just get together and have a discussion about it. So obviously I'm opposed to ADUs.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ma'am, Ms. Amy? Yeah, we're having tech, so usually we have the ability to turn on the mics from one of our two positions here, but the screen is not working, so she's having to physically go over there to turn the mics on.
Pete, it's good to see you back.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the County Council. My name is Amy Leahy. I live at 712 Monmouth Avenue in Severna Park. Tonight, I speak on behalf of the Greater Severna Park Council as the Vice President for Public Affairs. We ask that you vote against Bill 623 to allow accessory dwelling units. Our reasonings are, 1, the impact on our already overstressed infrastructure, roads, police, fire, water, sewer. No provision is made for parking additional vehicles on the street. That was removed. There's no limit on the number of people allowed to live in the dwelling unit. So there are also no density requirements for the buildings on the property, no setback requirements. The occupant of the accessory unit and the occupant of the principal dwelling unit do not need to be related, and the occupant of the principal dwelling does not have to be the owner of that home. So, as I said, no setbacks to the neighboring properties, which would allow an accessory dwelling unit to be built right up to the property line. No impact fees are going to be required of these accessory dwelling units. That's a big one. When I worked in constituent services under a previous county executive, I had to work with communities where parking disputes became an issue due to too many unrelated people living in a house, with each of them having an automobile being parked on the street, which severely impacted the other residents in those communities. Noise and neighborhood disputes became issues because of overcrowding. We in the Greater Severna Park Council have worked with a couple of communities where party houses became a problem, and there was no homeowner to make sure that the peace of the community was respected and upheld. We understand the need for people to have safe and secure and affordable housing and creating an opportunity for possible use of those who currently live in the community is something that needs to be considered. We ask that you at least make changes to the current bill that would tighten up the limits and the restrictions on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Thank you. I'm Kate Fox. I live in Davidsonville. Growth Action Network supports Bill 623 as amended. While not being the best option for all properties, as we've heard, the flexibility it adds to the creation of ADUs has the potential to help with the need for affordable housing in the county. 2 of my 3 adult children, both college graduates, are living at home right now because although both have jobs and would like to live independently, they cannot afford to rent an apartment, let alone buy a house, even with roommates. Oh no, that's my space, sorry. Having a detached ADU on our property, as this bill would allow, could provide them more independent living while saving for their own living spaces. Others, such as single parents or other professionals with college degrees, such as teachers, could be helped by being able to rent a detached ADU. Having an ADU could also help a homeowner with the cost of home ownership by being able to rent an ADU. While we do not support using ADUs for short-term rentals because we would like to see them used for longer-term affordable housing rentals, we support the pending amendment that requires owner occupancy of an ADU or the principal dwelling. GAN urges you to support this amendment and in its final form, Bill 623. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Thank
There
you
it
so
is.
much. Thank you. Good evening. I'm William Davidson. I live at 14 Bancroft Avenue, Annapolis, Maryland, really in Bay Ridge. And I am speaking on behalf of the community of Bay Ridge. Bill 623 has been fast-tracked through the county council, and that has made it difficult for communities to carefully assess unintended consequences of the bill, of allowing construction of ADUs on residential properties with really few restrictions. We think it's a little bit too flexible. The Bay Ridge Civic Association Board does not oppose ADU legislation in its entirety, but the board does agree that the ADU legislation should not supersede critical area requirements or apply in the county's very few designated historic communities. Specifically, the Bay Ridge Civic Association requests that the county council amend line 33 of paragraph 44 of section 18.1.101 definitions to read, quote, resource conservation in limited development areas of the critical area or in designated historic communities. I just add that waterfront communities are especially vulnerable to the unintended abuse by built 223 due to vacation rental pressures that we are already experiencing. The county's definition of short-term rental referenced in the bill, you look it up, is 120 days. That's virtually the entire rental season that we're experiencing in Bay Ridge. Our roads and our lots are already way too small to handle the added pressure to monetize properties in this way. Please simply exclude historic communities as well as critical area LDA areas. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment on the bill.
Thank you. Sir, Matt.
Hi, Matt Minahan, Edgewater, Chairman of the Growth Action Network. Again, welcomes the ADU bill and hopes the council passes it. We believe it's one of the many smart solutions needed for affordable housing. We're not persuaded by the testimony at the last council meeting that ADUs should be used for short-term rentals to allow homeowners to more rapidly recoup their investments. We believe the highest and best use of ADUs is provide affordable housing and accessibility for families and those who do not have the means for something more expensive. We agree with what Trudy McFall said at last council meeting, that these ADUs are needed to address the critical shortage of affordable housing. If the council must allow short-term rentals, we support the amendment to require owner occupancy. And I gotta say, tonight's amendments, I think, strengthen this bill a lot. The utility connection amendment, the construction amendment, thank you very much. The short-term rentals, as I said, we'd like to see none, but we would support the bill with that. And the minimum setback, disallowing variances. We think that's an important addition to this bill, and we thank you all for entering it. We hope the council supports this bill.
Thank you. Ma'am.
Hi, I'm Sandra Salvatore at 721 Red Cedar Road, Annapolis, Maryland. I'm highly in support of this for many of the reasons that were brought previously. Something to consider too is with the aging population, having experienced trying to place a parent in assisted living or in an apartment building, it's so cost prohibitive, and it's separated the family. It was not an option. If this would have been available, we would have been able, even if we just put an Airstream on in the back, would have worked for my mom. But it keeps families together. It helps us afford to keep our family together, provide better health care, because I could have then afforded for, visiting angels and people like that. So that's something to consider, because the population is aging, and we need to be able to keep families together and not separated by being put in a very expensive nursing home. So that's something to consider. I hear that you have a requirement, though, that about with septic and utilities and such. I would ask you to consider that, maybe because I'm just a junkie of the tiny house movement, but there are so many technologies available, like incinerator toilets, water catchment systems, solar panels, where that unit could be independent. There's no reason to have to put an extra burden on the septic system, sewer system, electric system at all. It's just in 2023, you've got a lot more options available. So I would like to see if that would be considered, where it could actually be a standalone unit. It doesn't have to necessarily tie to the existing utility structure if they take up the options to do that. So I'd like that for consideration. And I do think the argument about critical area or and having to do with variance and stuff is a little bit of a red herring. I have in our neighborhood, we have people homes that are getting doubled in size, roof lines that are doubled just by adding a second floor. That's more impactful than an ADU would be on the critical water features. And then just real quickly, and same thing with the parking. There are people like me that are by myself or low density family, and you have higher density families. It all kind of works out, and it's something the neighborhood can work on individually. But I really appreciate that you guys are supporting this, because it keeps families together.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all for your testimony. Please take your seat. So I believe that was the last group of folks that wanted to provide testimony on 623. If not, okay. Last call. So if you want to provide testimony on Bill 623, please come to the table. All right. Sir, please state your name and address for the record, and remarks will be limited to 2 minutes.
Okay. My name is Richard Jones. I live at 4 Farragut Road, Annapolis 21403, neighborhood of Bay Ridge. So I, along with the two others that I am here with, oppose this this ordinance. I hear both sides. I think that it is something that, for what the last woman spoke about, creating something affordable for an extended family member who would not be able to go into a nursing home. Our particular neighborhood and other neighborhoods that are in a critical area are impacted severely. We are always trying to work on preserving the bay. The overcrowdedness and the necessary, all that's necessary, the sewage and everything that would needed to be added. We are on a well. There is no public sewage, so or for water, so it would be additional well. The lots are small, so the impervious conditions are going to be smaller, and it just has a horrendous impact on the bay. And I also wanted to talk about pointing to Bill number 1923 in connection, not separate from this, but connection. I mean, if Ms. Rodvain is advocating for that, that tells me that there's an importance to you on conservationism. And I just see a disconnect here to have an overcrowding on being for the ban of the Bag Act and the plastic issue, and caring for the bay. I also am concerned about overcrowded. I work at the hospital. We are totally overcrowded, and that just needs to all be addressed. In the bigger picture, at the same time, as a previous woman spoke, how it really helps families and extended families be able to care for their loved ones.
Thank you. Thank you. Ma'am?
My name is Susan Margulies. I live at 113 Conduit Street, and I am enthusiastically in support of Bill 623 with amendments. I didn't see the one that I wished, which is just you would cut page 4, lines 7 through 10, and regulate short-term rentals through short-term rental legislation and not try to tack on short-term rental legislation into this bill. So back in early January 2021, the city of Alexandria passed their ADU bill. And at that time, they compiled an amazing staff report with data on ADUs from all different municipalities. And they compared Boulder, Colorado, which had no short-term rentals allowed, to Seattle, Washington, which did allow short-term rentals, over 2 decades. And what they found was that 0.5% of the housing stock added ADUs in Boulder, Colorado, and 1.5% added an ADU in Seattle over 2 decades. So yes, homeowner flexibility and allowing short-term rentals makes building an ADU 3 times more likely, but we're still talking 1 in 100 homes over 2 decades. And the city of Annapolis can show that as well, because in the past year, there's only been 1 ADU application since the bill was passed. And the reason is because these are expensive. ADUs are expensive, $50,000. And the very best you can hope for is persuading someone to upgrade their basement walkout with a kitchen. And if they add that stove, what happens to the ability of that property to short-term rent if they go to sell it? Does building that ADU, does adding that stove actually become a punishment to that family? Because the new homeowner, who may not be owner-occupied, may not be able to short-term rent. So be flexible, and yay ADUs.
Thank you. Please return to your seat. The public testimony on Bill 623 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 623.
Bill number 623, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development, zoning, accessory dwelling units.
Mr. Barron, and I do have some, actually, I know we're going to enter into some discussion here, but there were a couple questions that were posed during the testimony that I wanted to ask. One of those was and maybe the sponsor or someone from the Mr. Barron's team here can comment on it, but the HOA rules when it comes to ADUs, how does HOAs who have sort of policies internal to their communities, like how does that relationship work when it comes to ADUs? Obviously the county will permit it, but can a HOA be more restrictive, or what does that look like?
I'm going to send it over to the Office of Law for a definitive answer.
Okay.
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney. Yes, there are certainly a lot of things that the county law allows or prohibits that may be allowed or prohibited by an HOA. So if an HOA prohibits short-term residential rentals, then that would prevail. That would be enforced by the HOA, though, not the county.
Check. Okay. And when it comes to ADUs, doesn't fire code still govern occupancy in a structure? So could we in this space, could we have 500 people in this room?
Do you want me to answer?
Claudia O'Keefe, Engineer Manager with Inspections and Permits. Fire code is still fire code. We would review a house with an ADU against the same building code as any other structure. So, yeah.
Is it based off square footage? So if we had an 800 square foot facility.
In Maryland, single-family homes are required to be sprinklered.
Check.
So these would more than likely be required to be sprinklered. It was a little bit different when we had in-law suites where they were part of the same building and it was expected to be a family member. But we have very strict regulations on sprinklering single-family homes and duplexes and any other residence in the state of Maryland has to be sprinkled.
Understood. Any additional discussion? Oh, I didn't see which one came on first.
You go ahead. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a question from the testimony we heard this evening, but also from emails written in from constituents. It is my understanding, reading the bill, that there is a grandfathering provision so that if someone currently has a short-term rental in an ADU that is in their basement or another part of their house, that they are grandfathered in. So the bill itself is not going to change their ability to short-term rent. Am I correct?
Do you want to take this one?
Sure. Kelly County Supervising County Attorney. That's correct. Subsection 8 does contain that grandfathering clause, and it would encompass the short-term residential rental provision. So if somebody did have one now in a lawful ADU, they would be allowed to continue that.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Robin?
I also wanted to just clarify that things like critical area rules and setbacks are still, those do not go away simply because we're, making allowances for a detached ADU. Is that correct?
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, yes, that's correct.
And actually, one last point, if you don't mind. I've heard this tonight, but I've also heard it on a couple other occasions. The county council doesn't really have provisions for fast tracking except for emergency legislation. So there was nothing fast tracked about this bill. This went through actually the most ordinary process, and actually it was introduced, let's see if my math is correct, at the second meeting in January. The first hearing was held at the second meeting in February, and so this is actually the second evening of testimony, and we're likely to have one more if any of the amendments before us pass tonight. So there's really nothing fast-tracked about, and that's not, except for emergency legislation where immediate action is required. We don't have that process.
Okay. Any additional comments? Don't see any lights. I do see that there are amendments to this particular legislation. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number, I believe it's 4. Okay. Amendment number 4.
Number 4. Yeah. Amendment number 4. This amendment exempts accessory dwelling units from capital facility connection charges.
sponsor, Ms. Ravia.
Thank you. So as actually you heard from, this is a lesson that we learned from the City of Annapolis's bill. Thank you, Alderman Chandelmeyer, for raising this point. This can be prohibitively expensive. And the original version of this amendment actually would have also required that an ADU be allowed to use existing water and sewing connections if they are present. But my understanding, and Mr. Barron, maybe you can clarify that Department of Public Works has agreed to create some regulatory language that would, I'll let Mr. Barron go ahead and explain what we're trying to do here.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And just for the record, I appreciate the conversation we had in the minutes before the meeting on this very amendment. The administration's concern with codifying that the ADU owner could use the existing hookup is not because we plan to institute a policy that will require additional hookups for each ADU. In fact, quite the opposite. DPW will generally permit using the existing hookup. Our concern was codifying that there was a right to use the existing hookup because it might not have passed certain flow tests. It might not have been sufficient to handle, and every hookup, I'm told, is slightly different. So our concern with that piece of the provision of the amendment, we appreciate you taking that out, and in the coming weeks, DPW will have some written documents saying that generally our provision will be that you can use the existing hookup if it can handle the flow.
No more detail necessary on that particular topic. Also, with respect to, I'm sorry, I just took over. Do you mind if I continue just for a moment? With respect to septic systems, that will still require the ordinary testing to make sure that the existing septic system could handle additional use.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
One second, let me go ahead and bring this to discussion. May I have a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt amendment number 4. Allison Victor.
Is there a second?
Radvian, second. Thank you. So
All right, now you continue. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I feel like we've actually
Okay.
sort of explained what this amendment is. It's basically just exempting the capital facility connection charge, which can be very significant and can be a real obstacle to actually creating accessory dwelling units. And if the idea is that we want to make this possible, putting a $20,000 or $50,000 barrier in someone's path is really not going to be helpful to create them.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a follow-up to this conversation and question. If there's a circumstance where a flow test does not look favorable and there is not capacity, what would then be the solution?
If I may, we don't have somebody from DPW at the table, so I'll do my best. We're talking about that specific hookup, so they would have to install another hookup.
And that is where the EDU exemption exists.
Correct.
Okay.
And I didn't mention in the beginning, but maybe if I can talk a little bit about the administration's position on the amendment. So appreciate the sponsor's intent here and appreciate this discussion. Generally, we want to express some concerns with exempting these kind of fees. The fund is an enterprise fund, which means that if it is not the general fund, which means that fund has to be self-sustaining. So if this would trigger additional capital needs for handling the flow, the other ratepayers would have to pick it up. So the administration's general position on stuff like this is to oppose. So with that, it is a policy decision for this council. There are other exceptions from this charge, and so it's fully within this council's power to exempt it if you decide that it's worthy. The administration would still support the bill even if this was in there, but our preference would be to not see this amendment attached.
Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just because we're operating under this assumption of what the cost is for the capital facility connection charges, do we know exactly what it would be for these units? I've heard the number before of 50, 80,000, but I just didn't know if we knew specifically how much of an exemption this is. And if you need to get back to me, that's fine, Ms. Kenny. If you want to look at something and let me know.
Yeah, we may need a few minutes to look that up.
I can tell you the approximate amount. I believe if you were doing a water and a sewer hookup, it's about $13,000 for the capital facility connection charge. I know it's a little bit over $13,000. I can get you the exact number if the code will come up.
There's not 50 or 80, it's 13.
Just for the capital facility connection charge. If you did do a separate connection, then there's plumbing charges and connection charges and things like that. But the payment to the county is just over $13,000.
Ms. Pickert.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask the administration, do you have off the top of your head where else we've exempted these charges and for what purpose?
It's actually in the amendment. It is am I looking at the right one?
Religious facilities,
Yes.
if you don't mind, I can jump in.
Yep, thank you.
Religious facility, you got it, okay.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
So, we've had some very knowledgeable testimony tonight about the number of ADUs that we're likely to see in the next 2 decades, since we're not as large as Seattle or Denver. And we have exempted these charges clearly for actually larger facilities across the county. It seems like keeping the cost down of the ADU is a little more important than maybe the enterprise fund. What the hit to the enterprise fund that it might be. If we're doing housing for the elderly for moderate means, we've got a 55-unit housing facility going in near my community. So I'm in. I'm a yes.
Forgive. Thank you. Forgive the question, but just want to make sure clarify. When we're talking about the take off my glasses, I still need to read. Not used to these eyes. Permitting using the existing hookup, that would be for ADUs that are both in the primary structure and for the if there was a separate structure built. Is it? I guess what I'm asking is, in that, if the ADU is freestanding, is it possible for that to also tie in to the existing connection? Just wanted to clarify.
I believe it is.
Thank you.
Ms. Ravia.
Just one additional point. It's my understanding that if you were to, if you owned a home and you wanted to add, say, a 3-bedroom addition and a 2-bathroom addition, you would not pay any additional capital connection charge. That's correct, right?
That is correct.
So
and this is the policy question that we're getting.
Yeah,
Yep.
so this is, in fairness, this is to keep the policy for ADUs consistent with similar type expansions that you would see on a property.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if someone in that example that Councilwoman Rodvian has given does build an addition, does not pay a connection fee, but goes over the estimated usage that they paid with the initial connection, what then happens to pay for the difference?
Kelly Kenny, supervising county attorney. There is what's called a capital facility recoupment fee, which if there was a house or any structure that was connected to the utilities, that it's kind of like an overuse fee. if you use over, I believe it's 30,000 gallons per quarter, then you're charged an excess use rate, so to speak. So that is what would happen in the scenario that you were just contemplating, where they would not pay an additional capital facility connection charge, but they used a lot of water and sewer. I think that was your question, correct? Right, so that's what they would pay. And also, I did look up the capital facility connection charge. I was off on my numbers. It would actually be just about, just over $20,000. It's $10,286 for water and $10,286 for sewer.
Thank you. Mr. Chair. Thank you. I just want to make a point that I'm noting. So when we're looking at this, understanding Mr. Barron's point of view from the administration and the fact that any exemption from the capital connection charges are basically a policy question that we as a body have made to say that the existing ratepayers will effectively eat the additional costs. We've made that policy decision for primarily religious organizations, nonprofits, veterans, military service organizations, and nonprofit educational structures, and housing for elderly of moderate means. So from a policy decision-making standpoint, what this body has, at least the way I'm reading this, historically done is said, if there is a nonprofit use for something, or if there is sort of a nonprofit motivated use for something, then we are willing to say to other ratepayers, we're not going to make these folks put money into the fund and make this enterprise fund continue to grow. The difference with these accessory dwelling units to me is that, especially if we're allowing them to be some sort of a profit generator potentially as short-term rentals, I start to wonder how fair that is, or how much you're actually treating like things like when you're giving this exemption. So that's a struggle that I have with this when I look at it and read this and try to understand the policy behind what's been exempted previously versus what we're discussing now.
Ms. Ruffin.
Thank you. Mr. Volke, to just respond to that specific issue, when other jurisdictions have looked at what percentage of their accessory dwelling units become short-term rentals, it's around 10 to 12%. So the vast majority are still something either, something that would basically, like a long-term tenant or a family member, maybe not collecting rent on that at all, but providing, something helpful for their own family or a community member.
All right, seeing no more discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 4.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Nay.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volke.
Nay.
Ms. Hummer.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Nay.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
4 in the affirmative, 3 in the negative. Amendment number 4 has been adopted.
All right. Madam Secretary, please read the amendment number 5.
Amendment number 5. This amendment limits the exemption from impact fees for accessory dwelling units to only accessory dwelling units that are not part of the new construction of a principal single-family detached dwelling.
I'm sorry, Mr. Volke.
When you're ready, Mr. Chair.
No, go ahead. I found number 4. It was on the back of this.
Two-sided printing. We're trying to save the trees. So I guess the first thing I should do is I probably should move the amendment, and hopefully there's a second, then we can discuss it. How about that? So with that, I'll move the amendment number 5.
All right, is that a second?
Second. Allison Pickard.
Okay, discussion.
Thank you. So the intention behind this amendment comes out of our work session discussion, and I appreciate the discussion that we had there. One of the things that I understood after having that discussion was that if you were a developer and you wanted to offer an accessory dwelling unit as part of a new development, there was nothing that would prohibit you from doing that. And in fact, it seemed like the accessory dwelling unit under this legislation would be exempted from the impact fees. So the idea with this amendment is to say, this is really targeted toward existing structures and ensuring that if they are adding an accessory dwelling unit, that there are no impact fees that come in. That was the idea behind this, and basically just targeting this for what I think it's targeted for, which is existing structures, not necessarily as a new product offering for new development.
Madam, please.
Did the administration want to, before I start talking?
Defer to you, Councilwoman.
So I wanted to ask the administration how this would be applied, because in looking at the impact fees chart, a dwelling between 500 and 999 feet accrues the amount of nearly $9,000 in impact fees. So would when a new neighborhood is being built and there's a large the main house and an ADU, would it be the square footage be considered combined as with the two dwellings? Because that's a sizable difference if you're going to have an 800 square foot individual home ADU with $8,854 of impact fees, or if you were going to take that 800 square feet and add it to your, let's say, 3,500 square foot home, you're just going to have an increment of about give or take $1,000. It's a big difference, and we could leave it up to interpretation, but that's not always a good idea.
If you want Ms. Miller to.
Sure,
Looked
Lynn
like
Miller.
you were going to push the button.
Lynn Miller, Planning and Zoning. I think that's another policy decision that we would have to make depending on whether this amendment and how the bill passes, because as you know, to date, we haven't had an allowance for detached ADUs. So I think we would need to consult with staff internally and recommend a policy for how we would handle that.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
if I may. So, with impact fees and connection charges, new construction is already, before you even put a shovel in the ground, your housing is it's very expensive. So it concerns me that we don't have an exact answer to that, because that's a $9,000 or that's an $8,000 difference, and we're looking at using this this new policy in the code in an affordable housing mindset. So I might not be a fan of amendment number 5, but I might consider a more detailed, codified version of it at our next meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Vulcan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the comments from the councilwoman from District 2. I would just add that for the legislative history, if this does happen to pass and anybody looks back and wants to know, my intent and what I think should be the policy is the latter version of what Councilwoman Pickard was mentioning, which is that you add it to the square footage, that you not necessarily come in and put a whole new sort of square footage number on the ADU. That just seems unreasonable and it seems onerous. So it seems like the reasonable interpretation would be add the ADU size to the existing size, and that's your determination on the impact fees. So I just say that in the event that this does pass and that there is a legislative history on this, I just want to make sure I say what my intent as the sponsor of this amendment was in putting it up. Thank you.
Mr. Vulcan, I got a question real briefly. Let's say a developer built a house and then 5 years later, the homeowner who purchased it wanted to build an ADU. Would they then be required to pay that connection charge?
So we're talking about impact fees, not
Or
connection
I'm sorry, impact
but
fees.
No,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
would not, because that would then be an existing structure, which would then not be subject to this. It's the idea of simultaneously building the ADU as a product offering with new construction.
Oh.
That's the concept. Vis-a-vis the idea of existing, even if it's only 5 years old, but putting in an ADU.
And so your logic being that it kind of disincentivizes a developer for building communities that has houses and ADUs. Next thing you know, you got a whole community that has a house and an ADU on the same block.
I mean, if I was a smart developer, I would probably be looking at it that way, yeah.
Ms. Ravia?
So I feel like I'm sort of in the same position as Ms. Pickard, that and actually maybe Mr. Volke as well, that your intent is what I would like to see this amendment be. So I just want to ask a follow-up question, possibly from Ms. Miller, that is there anything analogous that, when you're building a new property, any other structures, do you have a pattern? Say it's a new structure that's not necessarily, obviously we don't allow detached dwelling units at this point, but is there, say, a detached garage or a detached guest house or a detached shed or pool house? Is there a particular method that you use, determining whether you just add the two together and use the spot on the chart for the sum, or use one for this and one for that?
Lynn Miller, well, not in relation to impact fees that I can think of, if that answers your question.
It does. Of course, it wasn't the one I was hoping for, but it does answer my question, so thank you.
Mr. Volkey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm assuming the reason is because you're not having people living in pool houses most of the time. So even when you're constructing them, it's a little different. But just understanding that this does, I hear my colleagues' concerns that maybe this leaves a bit open for interpretation. I think we did the same thing with Amendment 4 in regard to the idea that DPW is going to look at the flow rates and sort of put out a policy memo on this is how we're going to interpret this. So it seems to me that asking planning and zoning to do the same thing here is kind of the same thing, because we didn't necessarily want to get into the details of legislating on Amendment 4 with capital facility connection charges, so it's the same concept here. So I hope that that will not be too much of an impediment.
Ms. Pickert?
I understand, but it's again, $8,854 interpretation that, since this bill is getting amended, I think we can do a better job and be more clear in our legislative intent. I'm still a no.
Seeing no further discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 5.
Ms. Radvian?
I really want to get to yes on this, and if there's any way to add that last little piece of clarity, I'm there, but because it's not there, I'm going to vote nay.
Ms. Ledbetter?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Nay.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Ms. Hummer?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
5 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative. Amendment number 5 has been adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 6.
Amendment number 6. This amendment reduces the number of required parking spaces for accessory dwelling units from 1 space per unit to half a space per unit.
Mr. Volkey? I'm sorry, we had a conversation about this.
This one's
prior.
going to be fun.
Yes,
I'm excited for
it
this
is.
one.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Move amendment, I guess I need to move amendment 6. Unless you want me to describe it.
Yep,
before I
that's
move
fine.
it.
We'll motion to adopt.
Second, Fiedler.
Thank you.
All right.
So, yeah, Mini Cooper. I like that on this amendment. I'm trying to strike a balance, right? I understand the existing law says 1 parking space for an accessory dwelling unit. I understand the bill as written would remove entirely the parking requirements, and I'm just trying to find a way to get that middle ground. So I thought, why not half a parking spot? All my colleagues just about have asked me, how do you calculate half a parking spot? Because I think it's a great question. My understanding is the county calculates a parking spot as, I believe, 9 by 18. That's how they look at it. So to me, that's 4.5 by 9. So I would suppose that the way to make this work in a practical way is that if you are adding an accessory dwelling unit, you have to prove to the county that you have an additional, beyond the existing parking requirements that you have, 4.5 feet by 9 foot area where you can park your Mini Cooper or your potentially dirt bike or your ATV once we get some of those off the road. VW Bug. So I'm trying to find a middle ground on this that respects the concerns that some people have about parking and what this bill could do, and I recognize a lot of people think it may not do that, while at the same time not keeping the restrictions as high as they were before, to where people believe that we are now sort of effectively poison pilling this bill, and we're ensuring that the parking requirements are too onerous. So that's the thinking behind this, but I am interested in hearing my colleagues' thinking on this too.
Ms. Pickard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the attempt to I appreciate it. It's I think we all learned a little bit when we're building a townhouse community or a parking lot for an airport, and there's a 2.5 or a 3.5 parking requirement. There is never actually a half parking space constructed in one of those parking lots. 3.5 is added to 3.5, and you get 7 parking spaces at a tennis court. So this is another impediment to getting ADUs actually constructed, and I would like to ask my colleagues to resist even the half Vespa parking space. But good try.
Yeah, I think that's the conversation we had on the phone. It was more of a, for a single family house, it's just one unit. Whereas if you're in a multi-dwelling, you have the cumulative effect of those multiple dwellings to increase the parking. And so I wasn't sure how you can create a cumulative effect with one house. Also in Brooklyn Park, just like the house example that we had with the work session, the way some of the properties in Brooklyn Park are designed, where the house is right against that, or pretty close to the sidewalk, which is certainly within the right of way. There really is no, whether it was a whole parking spot or a moped parking spot, we forced them to create. There's really no room to be able to. Now the back of the house, some of them are in like a quarter acre, where you could certainly build something in the back, and a parent could have street parking, and they park or they walk through the side gate to go to the ADU. And so I'm still trying to envision that parking space in some of these houses up there, and I just can't see it. And so that was my struggle with trying to, whether it was the half or the whole, it still would complicate those houses up there, at least in Brooklyn Park. That's all. That was my friction on it. Ms. Rodvian?
I was just going to say, I assumed Mr. Volke was trying to make space for my electric bike, and no, I'm kidding. My bike doesn't actually need a parking space.
Mr. Volke.
To keep it multimodal, my next amendment will be 0.25 for the parking space. That would be the bike parking spot.
Any further discussion? Did the admin have any comments on this?
No, just I know it's a funny discussion about half a parking spot, but we do have real concerns about how we would enforce it. So we would ask you to reject this amendment.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 5.
Amendment number 6.
I'm sorry, amendment number 6.
Ms. Rodvian.
Nay.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Nay.
Mr. Volke. Ms. Hummer.
Nay.
Ms. Fiedler.
Because parking is a constant issue in the 5th District, aye.
And Mr. Smith.
Nay.
3 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. Amendment number 6 has been defeated.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 7.
Amendment number 7. This amendment allows the short-term rental of the principal single-family detached dwelling or accessory dwelling unit if the principal single-family detached dwelling or accessory dwelling unit is owner-occupied.
Okay, Ms. Rodvian?
Motion to adopt, please.
Any
Second, Allison Pickard.
All right. Madam?
This is basically hoping to strike the compromise on the discussion of short-term rentals use using ADUs as a short-term rental. In my experience, well, first off, if we completely if we let the bill pass as it currently stands, we would actually put a good number of folks that are currently operating short-term rentals out of business, and I don't think we want that. On the other hand, in my experience, the problem short-term rentals are ones that are not owner-occupied. So by limiting it to owner-occupied, just the short-term rental piece, you can still have an ADU whether or not you're talking owner-occupied, but just the short-term rental piece, you really cut down on the vast majority of, the neighborhood concerns that at least I've encountered from my constituents, as long as there is the property owner is somewhere on the property, whether it's in the ADU or the primary dwelling. So I ask for your support.
Did the admin have anything in reference to this amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're supportive of this amendment. understand we're trying to strike a balance here, and it's going to be hard to get everybody happy, but we think this is as close as we're going to get.
Check. Mr. Volkey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just that I understand this, previously in the legislation, we'd had that the principal single-family detached dwelling or accessory unit had to be owner-occupied. We took that out at the last meeting by way of an amendment. So now we're putting back in an owner-occupied requirement. I just want to make sure I understand exactly what we're doing with this, because we'd had it, it came out, now it's going back in, but it sounds like for a different reason. So maybe if you can just give me a little more context.
Sure. So the original provision regarding short-term rental was that the entire property, the primary dwelling and the ADU, had to be rented in one package. This would allow, and somehow I think this was really just my oversight, thinking about different pieces and not always thinking about or not looking at how those two pieces work together, realizing that if we're saying you can only rent your property that has an ADU as a single package with the primary dwelling, but also expecting the owner to be occupying the property, we have two conflicting things there, and so they don't work together. So that was removed. That's why we removed the owner occupied. This is really to sort of address the concerns that have come up with short-term rentals, and so we don't multiply those with with accessory dwelling units, to say we'll allow short-term rentals, but the owner must be on the property. So we got here in a strange manner.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for a matter of record, and I know Councilwoman Rodvian and I discussed this earlier, we heard from residents in Bay Ridge, we heard from Ms. Leahy about short-term rentals that have become house parties and issues within the community. This amendment would not address those residents that currently do not have an ADU, which tend to be the ones that have been problems because there is no ADU legislation. Just for confirmation, I don't know if the sponsor or administration, Office of Law.
If I understood the question correctly, this would require an owner to be on premises, which I think by that very nature might not create more of those problems. How about phrasing that way?
Understood, but my question is, if I have a short-term rental and I do not have an ADU on premise, I believe our current code does not require owner occupied.
Correct. I think,
Can-
unless Kelly's gonna tell me.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Trying to remember back to the
That's-
bill.
it is-
we used to
that's
get.
correct.
That's 2019.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago.
Okay, thank you.
And I will say that is an issue that has come up in my district, and I suspect it's probably come up in all of our districts, and I would be willing to see what we can do to tackle that, the sort of the party house issue. Some of them are absolutely, some of the things that have been happening in short-term rentals are absolutely outrageous, and if we can make legislative fixes, I know that police calls have been made and things like that, but if there's legislative fixes on the party houses, I'm committed to work on that as well.
Okay. No additional discussion. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 7.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Ms. Hummer.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 7 has been adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 8.
Amendment number 8. This amendment prohibits a variance for an accessory dwelling unit that reduces the minimum setback requirements to an adjacent lot located in a residential district.
Ms. Fiedler?
Thank you. Just very quickly before I make a motion, this came out of the idea that we have no minimum lot size currently in the legislation for ADUs. And we've heard testimony such as we need to promote ADUs, we need to remove barriers for any ADUs. So my concern is that if someone does not have the lot size to build a new construction ADU, that they would apply for a variance and be right on a property line with their neighbor. And that is concerning for me and I think some other areas of our county. So motion to adopt.
And a second? Okay. All right. Any additional discussion, ma'am?
I just want to clarify, you brought this up at the beginning, but I'll make sure. So if a homeowner association has setback requirements that are different than the county's, those will still be in place above, you know, if they're stricter than the county, the homeowner association would supersede the county's, is that correct?
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, yes, that's correct. The county wouldn't enforce those, but the HOA can enforce them.
Ms. Pickard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, we've been here before when we prohibit a variance of any kind, and it can be problematic. I mean, I just envision that homeowner who doesn't have the perfectly square lot, whose, you know, lot line, you know, is more of a triangle in the back. What, you know, you could name the different examples where you may need a variance because at the front of the ADU you meet the setback, but maybe at the back you don't. I mean, that's just one simple example. I think the prohibiting a variance leaves very little wiggle room when we have irregular lot sizes.
The admin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think the intent here is to protect, but what I would say is there is a variance process for a reason. I think it was Ms. Hummer or Ms. Pickard noted sometimes lots are irregularly shaped and, you know, it's square peg round hole, but there is a process for the variance. So we're comfortable with the bill as drafted. Think this is a policy decision for the council and generally think that this is maybe not necessary because of the variance process, that if there was an egregious case that it would go through that. That said, I think we came down when we discussed this internally on the side of the bill as drafted, but understand the intent of the maker of the amendment.
Ms. Ledbetter?
Definitely appreciate your comments. For me, I think I see this amendment as a great compromise, as a step of working together between those who have the fear about the potential negative impacts of ADUs in their communities and the need that others have very clearly articulated. So I think this is this amendment is an opportunity to find a middle ground in this bill to be able to move forward while at the same time addressing some of the fears and the concerns that those in the communities that have. I know a lot of the older communities in my district don't have HOAs, so they don't have that extra level of protection for those who might seek it. They rely solely on the code in the county. I just think that this, you know, yes, I hear your concern, but at the same time, I think this is one of those times where giving people the peace of mind, this is worth it.
Ms. Feather?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the conversation. I do want to add that, yes, we do have the variance process, but I also couple that with hearing that ADUs don't explode when ADU legislation is passed. It's kind of a trickle. I know just looking at all of the properties, the lot configurations in most communities, they're usually rectangular or square. It's not too often that you have a triangular lot. And then I couple that with the variance process is not perfect. This council just recently voted on legislation on a variance decision in the 5th District. And I would hate to have property owners be fighting with their neighbor who was granted a variance to build an ADU right next to their house. So that is the compromise that I'm trying to reach. We don't have minimum lot sizes, but I'm trying to prevent neighbors feuding for years.
Ms. Broadview?
Thank you. Just for the sake of, you know, everyone who's listening, could you describe the variance process?
ask the experts to do that so you get the right answer.
Ms. Miller's like, I don't know.
Sherlyn Miller. The Office of Planning and Zoning accepts an application for a variance. Our staff evaluate it in line with the criteria that are listed in Article 18 for granting a variance. We draft a staff recommendation report, and that goes to the administrative hearing officer. The staff recommendations are published online for public review, and it is heard at a public hearing, and the decisions made by the administrative hearing officer. Decisions can be appealed within 30 days.
And if I may ask a follow-up question,
Yes, ma'am.
what are the criteria? And I apologize if that's like a ridiculously long list that you don't have memorized, even though it seems like you have everything memorized.
I don't have it memorized. Miss Corby's going to put it in front of me.
Thank you.
It's not a ridiculously long list, but it is a list. The first requirement is it's the minimum necessary to afford relief. The granting of the variance cannot alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Can't substantially impair the appropriate use or development of adjacent property. There's one that relates to reducing forest cover and portions of the critical area, and can't be detrimental to public welfare. This is not a touch screen.
The council was working on that in our budget, just FYI.
Yeah. That's the last one.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ms. Vito?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just point of record again. So the Office of Planning and Zoning makes recommendations throughout the process, but that doesn't mean that those recommendations are always taken. Again, I go back to the most recent variance case that this council discussed.
Yes, that's correct. It's the hearing officer's decision.
Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 8.
Ms. Rodvian.
Nay.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Nay.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Ms. Hummer.
Nay.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
4 in the affirmative, 3 in the negative. Amendment number 8 has been adopted.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 9.
Amendment number 9. This is a long description for me to read in. Would you, Ms. Fiedler, would you like to?
Yes, I would. Assistant Administrative Officer is probably texting me as we're speaking. I would like to withdraw amendment number 9.
Okay. All right, so amendment number 9 is withdrawn. Wow, that was a lot of amendments. So, Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 10. It's being
This is also,
distributed
this
right
is
now.
another long description, so you have a few minutes. I'll read slowly. Amendment number 10. This amendment allows the short-term residential rental of the principal single-family detached dwelling or accessory dwelling unit if either is owner-occupied, and prohibits the use of an accessory dwelling unit for short-term residential rentals for more than 2 weeks each calendar year if it is separated from the principal single-family detached dwelling unit by an attached garage or a breezeway, or is in a structure detached from the principal single-family dwelling unit.
Okay, Ms. Fiedler, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Ms. Margulies, I see you with a very concerned look on your face. I want you to know I too agree that the short-term rental section was not part of the bill. It makes it a bit complicated. So I originally had an amendment drafted that prohibited short-term rentals in ADUs, understanding that there was a grandfathering for those who already have them legally in their primary residence. then I started to hear from other residents who expressed interest in potentially doing a short-term rental in their ADU in order to stay in their home. They're getting older, they have space to do it. So I considered it more thoughtfully and thought, you know, if we already have these in existence, I don't want to stop them and prohibit individuals. This amendment keeps the status quo with regard to short-term rentals and ADUs, but for those newly defined ADUs, which are the ones in attached or detached garages or new construction, because the primary goal here is affordable housing for our veterans, our disabled, and our folks who are just struggling to make ends meet. They should be the primary goal of this bill, and those newly defined ADUs would be restricted to 2 weeks out of the calendar year. And I motion to adopt.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any additional, ma'am?
So as I read this, we've talked about the use of a short-term rental. I think we got to a really nice compromise with mandating that at least one, the main structure or the ADU would have to be owner occupied. But allowing short-term rentals of either, with one being owner occupied, is also a way to keep housing and folks able to age in place, housing affordable. So this allows a certain subset of our population that likes to rent out their house for 2 weeks during commissioning week, which is, but the rest of the county that is choosing to have the option of short-term rental is out of luck. So I really like the amendment we passed a few minutes ago, acknowledging the fact that the owner occupied mandate of one of the two dwellings, with the intent that a short-term rental could be keeping a family aging in place and affording that lifestyle. So affordability still remains at the goal of this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Volkey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to think through an issue that my colleague brought up that is interesting to me. If we passed this amendment, if I built an ADU in my backyard and wanted to rent that to my mother, and it's a detached ADU that's not in existence before this legislation passes, my understanding is that she could only be there 2 weeks a year if this amendment passes. Am I understanding that correctly? Somebody? Anybody?
We just got this amendment, so
Well, you guys are the experts. You're on the
thinking.
fly. You can do it.
Go ahead.
That
You
is
can
how
phone a
I would
friend.
interpret it.
Yeah, that's how I read it too. That's my concern with this. Is I completely understand where my colleague is going, and I think she's well intentioned in where she's going, but there's no distinction. So if it was a family member, if it was a really close friend that you wanted to stick in the backyard and rent to them, you're limited to 2 weeks a year, regardless of who that person is. That's the way I'm reading this amendment. I just want to make sure you all see it the same way I see it, as the experts, the panel.
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney. I would add that short-term residential rentals are defined in Article 11 as those that are advertised. Well, but they're also those that are advertised on a hosting platform such as Airbnb. So that would not encompass your scenario.
As long as I didn't put on Airbnb and my mom found it there.
Ms. Fiedler?
Thank you, and Mr. Chair, I think if I understand the hypothetical, you built an ADU that's detached, that you, in your backyard, that you want your mom to stay in. But you're charging. I would assume you want your mother to stay for more than, I know, I'd want my mom to stay around for more than 120 days, but we're close. that would be permissible, right? You could be a year-round renter.
Yes, that's correct.
Interesting. Ms. Ravian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just really want to drive home the point of the importance of having the flexibility, especially when it comes to financing the construction of your ADU. If we're looking at, a minimum of $50,000 to $100,000 in the construction of a detached ADU, that's, going to be something that most people are going to have to finance. And then if you have the option to, even if it's only, temporarily, to use it as a short-term rental, you can convince the bank that, yes, indeed, I can make this work. I will be able to make the payments. And just thinking, I don't know how many of you, like Zillow, like if you're a homeowner and you have looked on Zillow to see how much Zillow estimates your home is worth. I could not afford my own home. And I think that's true for a huge portion of the people in the county. And so anything that can be done to help, folks stay in their homes and not have to move out, even if it doesn't, not immediately achieve the goal of affordable housing, or it at least provides flexibility. Someone earlier mentioned the idea of being able to allow an elderly relative. I had the unfortunate experience of looking at assisted living about a year ago and was completely alarmed to find that assisted living can be as much as $7,000 to $12,000 a month. And so any flexibility that we can have, to help people be able to stay in their homes and provide better options, more affordable options for any myriad of situations, I think we should try and keep and not limit, not limit what property owners are able to do, because I think we really are in crisis. And you may not feel it if you own your own property, although you may feel it when you get your tax assessment and you're like, wait, my property's worth that? Yes, it is. So any flexibility that we can give homeowners, I think, is really needed.
Chair. Thank you. We don't have anyone from the banking industry here tonight, it doesn't look like. I don't know if anybody could give any indication or insight into lenders and when they look at these types of situations, if short-term rentals are viewed more profitable than long-term rentals. Therefore, a rental, in my mind, a rental is a rental. So if I'm building an ADU and I'm looking for financing and I say, yes, we have a great affordability need in our county, and the opening remarks were that this bill is to help house our elderly, our veterans, our disabled, and those who need affordable housing, that in my mind is not someone who's staying for 2 weekends. That's someone who is looking for a place to live. And this would ensure that those new ADUs that we're allowing in this bill that are detached are going to that population that is looking for affordable housing. And that's all I have.
Seeing no further discussion.
I just wanted to do a quick, I don't know if these numbers, just very rough numbers, but if you were to, I guess this is assuming that you were able to rent your short-term rental every night of the month, but, say it were $150 a night, which I don't know if that's the going rate at all, times 30, that's $4,500 a month. And, a month to, like a regular landlord-tenant situation, things are starting around $2,000. So it still is a pretty significant jump from what you could earn in a regular, what do you call if it's not a short-term rental? Ordinary term rental? Long-term rental. Thank you. I must be getting tired.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 10.
Ms. Radvian.
Nay.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Nay.
Mr. Volkey. Ms. Hummer.
Nay.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Nay.
3 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. Amendment number 10 has been defeated.
Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 11.
Amendment number 11. This amendment corrects references to preceding requirements.
Ms. Rodvian.
My apologies. I know that I just need to. I believe this is somewhat of a technical correction. Can I call it a technical correction? Okay, then I'm going to call this amendment makes a technical correction. This amendment corrects references to the preceding requirements.
Okay. Admin, you're.
We like correct reference.
Seeing no additional.
Motion to adopt. Amendment number 11.
Okay, well, that was pretty efficient. I like that. Seeing there are no additional comments or discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 11.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Ms. Hummer.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 11 has been adopted.
Okay. That was good. Bill number 6-23 will be heard on March 20th, 2023. All right. Madam Secretary, please read Bill number 7-23.
Bill number 723, an ordinance concerning personnel, positions in the classified service, position control.
All right. 1 second. All right, Ms. Dyer. Oh, there she is. Okay.
Okay,
Ms. Dyer.
so good evening.
Thank you.
Hannah Dyer with the administration, here to present Bill 723. So I'm joined by several people at the table, as you can see, and one even behind me. From personnel, we have Jackie Rikers Atkinson and Sarah Heffernan. Sorry, I was so surprised. We switched very suddenly from the ADU bill.
The 623 took the wind out of you. That's what
Yeah, I was working on a grant application back there. Okay, so from the police department, we have Major Ross Passman. From detention, behind me, I think we have Pat Moore. And from finance, we have Billy Penley. And I think, do we have both Office of Law or just Greg? Can't see everyone. Oh, and Lori on the side of it. So we have a whole team tonight. So this bill was discussed at the last work session and makes changes to a number of positions in the classified service that are all detailed in the fiscal note you all have. So with that, we are all here to answer any questions you may have.
I know I've.
Do you want me to go through them all?
Yeah, if you could just briefly provide
Sure,
a
so
summary
there's
of
several.
723 and talk about the positions that you wanted to change. Yeah.
Sure. There's several. I'll start with the Office of Law. We're decreasing one secretary position and increasing one management assistant position, and this is to fulfill IT needs. In the police department, we're decreasing one secretary 2 position and one office support assistant 1 position, and increasing 2 office support specialist positions. And this is to meet administrative support needs in the department. In the Department of Detention Facilities, we are increasing one correctional program specialist 2 position and increasing one program manager position to meet training and compliance needs. And I think this is the last one, in the Office of Finance, we are decreasing one office support assistant 2 position and increasing one financial reporting manager position to meet ambulance billing needs.
Thank you. And just for the record, we did discuss this at the work session for those that are either watching online or will watch later. But is there any other additional discussion on Bill number 723?
Just going to thank
First of all-
everybody for sitting here through the ADU discussion. So appreciate that. Thank you.
We will now open up the public hearing on Bill number 723. Madam Secretary, did we receive any testimony through the online testimony tool?
We did not receive anything ahead of time, Mr. Chair.
And I don't see anyone that signed up to speak on 723. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on bill number 723? Seeing no movement, we will close. The public hearing on bill number 723 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 723.
Bill number 723, an ordinance concerning personnel, positions in the classified service, position control.
All right, seeing no lights, no further discussion. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on bill number 723.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Ms. Hummer.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 723 has been passed.
Thank you, Mr. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 823.
Bill number 823, an ordinance concerning personnel, positions in the classified service.
Mr. Hart?
All right, so Hannah Dyer again with the administration for Bill 823. This is another personnel bill with another big panel, but some changes, so I'll go through everyone again. We still have Jackie Rikers Atkinson and Sarah Heffernan from personnel. I think we have, or maybe not, Jessica Lays from, maybe we don't have Rec and Parks here tonight, but we still have Major Ross Passman up here from police, and from law, Lori Blair Klassmeyer. So this bill was also discussed at the February work session, and it creates new classifications of positions and makes changes to pay and minimum qualifications to certain positions and modifies the number of positions approved in the classified service. Specifically, the bill changes the title of the existing Park Ranger classification to Park Ranger 1 and creates a Park Ranger 2 classification to allow a track for advancement. And the 22 current Park Rangers approved in the budget are reclassified as Park Ranger 1s. The Park Ranger 2 position will remain vacant for now, and any future classifications would need to be done through the annual budget process. The bill also would increase the pay grade for the police fleet coordinator position from NR 13 to NR 15. And so we are here to answer any questions you have, and we ask for your support.
And I'm glad you mentioned the annual budget, because I was going to, are you in the process of hiring for these positions right now as soon as they get adjusted from our end?
So personnel can step in if you want, but we can't hire for these yet because we don't have them.
Mm-hmm.
So once you approve this legislation, then we would have the ability to advertise them and start the hiring process.
And your intent is to do that once that is updated and changed?
Yes.
Because I was going to ask why not submit it as in the annual budget and make the changes?
Yeah, and
as well.
I should clarify, so this, with the last bill, that was kind of doing the reclassifications that we would need to advertise and recruit for. These, I believe, so all of the park ranger positions, like basically there's no change except for adding that one on their title right now.
Sure.
So that would just happen essentially immediately. There may be some paperwork involved, but basically immediately. The police position, maybe Major Passman can clarify, that may already be filled. Okay, it is already filled, so that would also be not a recruitment issue.
All right, thank you.
Just a quick question, thank you, Mr. Chair, about the police fleet coordinator. So is the idea there with changing the pay band, is that a result of some sort of negotiation with the union? Or is that a union position, or is this just to try to give more room so that you can sort of raise somebody's pay a little bit?
The fleet coordinator's position was created years ago, and,
Okay.
and the job responsibilities have increased, and the fleet has increased, so it's
Got it.
more work.
Okay, thank you.
All right, see no lights. We will now open the public hearing on bill number 823. Madam Secretary, did we receive any testimony through the online testimony tool?
We did not receive anything ahead of time, Mr. Chair.
All right, we will now hear from individuals who signed up ahead of time, which I do not see. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on bill number 823? Seeing no movement, the public hearing on bill number 823 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 823.
Bill number 823, an ordinance concerning personnel, positions in the classified service.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on bill number 823.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Ms. Hummer.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 823 has been passed.
All right. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 923.
Bill number 923, an ordinance concerning Subdivision and development, adequate public facilities, public schools.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Coming back to the table is Ms. Miller and Ms. Blair Kosmeyer is sticking with us. 923 was discussed previously at the February work session. Just to remind the council and the public, 923 extends the sunset that was put in place by 8521 for certain adequate public, let me try that again. School adequate public facilities provisions. The sunset we would be extending is until September 1st, 2023. As we mentioned at the work session, we have been working on addressing our APF code. The administration intends to work with council to bring forward legislation in the near term. However, we do not want to have a seesaw effect where if this council were to accept changes the administration proposes or change the proposals that the administration proposes and change the law, we would have a seesaw effect. So let's just change the law once when we're ready. So what this bill does is extend that sunset, which I think was set to expire in May of this year to September of this year. So not a long extension, just a little bit more time for us to get our work done.
Thank you. Any discussion? Oh. I always go to Ms. Picker because APF is it's like her baby. So seeing none, we will now open the public hearing on bill number 923. Madam Secretary, did we receive any testimony through the online tool on 923?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we did receive one submission that went to the whole council. It's a part of the summary that is posted online, and it will be added to the record.
Thank you. We will now hear from individuals who signed up ahead of time. I am seeing one. Mr. Kurt, please come up. Svensson. That's it? Yes.
My name is Kurt Svensson. I live in Arnold, and I actually watch those council work sessions. Thank God for the videotapes. Because sometimes it's eye-opening, and I'm sorry to say, in this case, alarming. Nothing to do with the extension of period of time. It's just, let me just read a few things. At the 1 hour, 30 minute, 47 mark in that videotape, Mr. Barron states, the school APF work group has met for over 2 years. There's a massive volume of data. We're close to shopping concepts. A few minutes before after that, Councilmember Bickard says, we're ready. We've analyzed the data. We need to present the data in a way that's understandable. It's complicated. There's a lot of misunderstandings out there. She goes on to say, I can't think about this anymore. I dream about the APF. We have to get this done. So I'd like to keep it September 1st and keep the pressure on and move this bill in the next couple of months. I'm very concerned that all of this is going to be dropped on the members of the county council and the general citizenry for the very first time when the council ordinance is introduced and the legislative clock starts ticking. My search of the county website has yielded 0 formal status reports or public information sharings or briefings regarding the substantive work of the school APF work group. There's no other way to say this as a citizen. It's offensive and disrespectful. 2 years and not a report to my council member, let alone something that a citizen can read. We've had just about, the citizens, I think, have had just about enough of having important, complicated matters shoved down our throats with little time to process the work that's already been fully developed and packaged into shopping concepts. So please, county citizens are not just going to trust you because it's so complicated and too complicated for us to understand. Please share data, not storylines.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to speak on bill number 923? Seeing no movements, the public hearing on bill number 923 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 923.
Bill number 923, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development, adequate public facilities, public schools.
Ms. Pickert?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we've been working on in a collaborative fashion on understanding school APF, not only with the school board, but with council representation, administration representation from Office of Planning and Zoning, and community representation. All stakeholders have been working. We've also endured an election, personnel changes. The reason for this bill is to allow that time and to allow that rollout of data and understanding of, yes, the complicated school APF. That's why we're here tonight. That's why 923 is before this council, so that we aren't bumping up against May 1st. We've extended it to September 1st. So I asked my colleagues to pass this extension bill, and I look forward to working with everybody and the administration as we present a reform bill in the near future. That's how this body works. And we've done in the last, in my time on this council, we have used the legislative timeline to pass lots of good policy in that 90-day, 95-day time frame. So I think we're on to something here with the extension, and I look forward to passing the bill tonight. Thank you.
Any additional discussion? Seeing none.
Mr. Chair, if you
Sorry
don't
about
mind.
that. Yes,
Just before we get to the voting on this particular piece of legislation, with regard to the work group, is there the intention to release a preliminary report for digestion's sake for the general public? It's getting late. Prior to any massive legislation, or are you all still in the process of figuring that out?
Yeah, thank you, Madam, Ms. Fiedler. Yes, we are in the process of figuring that out. When any proposal comes forward, as this county executive has always said, we need to make sure we're providing the data for public scrutiny. I think I agree with what Mr. Svensson said, that we can't just drop a complicated thing and hope that everybody will just trust us. We need everybody to kick the tires on the data and really understand this in the full context of what it is. So we intend to provide as much information as we can.
Thank you.
Seeing no additional comments or lights. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 923.
Bill number 923, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development, adequate public facilities, public schools.
All right, and please call the roll on bill number 923.
Ms. Radvian.
Aye.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Ms. Hummer.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 923 has been passed.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 1023.
Bill number 1023. An ordinance concerning floodplain management, good grief, I'm sorry, floodplain management, erosion and sediment control, and stormwater management, subdivision and development, water quality improvement projects.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got a big team here with me. We have Mr. Michelson, our Environmental Policy Director and DPW Bureau of Watershed Protection. Got it right. All right. From OPZ, Ms. Miller is sticking with us. Mr. Badami from INP and Ms. Kenny from the Office of Law. This bill was discussed also at the work session. But to remind everybody, 1023 makes changes under Article 16 of our county code to define water quality improvement projects and exempt them under certain conditions from the modification process for disturbance of natural features. Currently, water quality improvement projects such as stream and wetland restoration and outfall restoration work, which necessarily take place in locations where they temporarily impact environmental resources, require environmental modifications from county agencies in order to receive permits. These modifications are routinely granted because the work is considered self-mitigating, but the preparation of modification requests adds significant additional costs to projects and time to receive permit issuances. The exemptions in 1023 will recognize the environmental benefits associated with these projects and expedite their implementation, reduce costs, and reduce the permit review burden on county staff. We are at the appropriate time bringing 2 amendments before this council. Unfortunately, those amendments were not ready before the work session, so we apologize, but happy to explain them at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Is there any discussion from up here?
I have 2 amendments in front of me for Bill 1023. Am I on the wrong bill?
No, you're on the
Oh, for the work session.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute, I'm looking at.
All right. We will now open public testimony on bill number 1023. Madam Secretary, to receive any testimony through the online testimony tool.
We did not receive anything ahead of time, Mr. Chair.
All right. We will now hear from individuals who signed up ahead. I did not see anyone from the audience who wants to speak on bill 1023. Seeing no movement, public hearing on bill number 1023 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 1023.
Bill number 1023, an ordinance concerning floodplain management, erosion and sediment control, and stormwater management.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a long title. Subdivision and development, water quality improvement projects.
I heard that pause and I thought it was the end of it. You were just breathing. All right. I see there are 2 amendments. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Amendment number 1. This amendment makes a certain stylistic change to the definition of water quality improvement project.
Mr. Barron?
Yes, thank you. This amendment is a small language change to ensure these exemptions are applicable in appropriate circumstances. We'll ask you approve, and happy to answer any questions.
Motion to adopt.
Second. I do have some questions. I think at the next work session, I think I'll probably, because I got to do some more. I am not a water quality expert by any stretch of the imagination. So I'll definitely spend this next couple of weeks or whatever, at least a week, prepping for that. So any discussion on amendment number 1? All right, seeing none. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Ms. Hummer.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 1 has been adopted.
Right, thank you. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 2.
Amendment number 2. This amendment exempts certain water quality improvement projects from the site development plan process.
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt, Allison Pickard.
Rodvian second.
All right, Mr. Barron, do you want to speak on this one?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff recommended this amendment while reviewing a proposed private stream restoration project. These projects are similar to others included in the legislation, and we wanted to include them in the exemption from the SDP plan process. While you and I may not be water quality experts, I have one sitting right next to me, so I'm going to ask him to speak for a moment on this.
Sure. So Eric Michelson, Public Works. This, we discovered in communication with planning and zoning that this requirement had been put in legislation in the past couple of years, and that these projects were not exempted from this site development planning process. So we figured while we were sort of cleaning up this issue in the code elsewhere, to take care of it here as well. And so this is just an additional location in the code where these projects would be expedited, essentially. And
for the record, I'm certainly in favor of streamlining the process to help improve the whole stormwater remediation and everything else we've been doing to help clean up the environment. This is to help expedite that process, at least in my mind. And so if it takes hurdles or government away from being able to do that, then I'm all about it. But any further discussions on?
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Volker?
Chair. Just so you mentioned, Mr. Michelson, that this had been added to the code. Do we know why it was put in? Any
Lynn.
history on it?
Kelly, maybe you may have. some
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney. I think what was discovered just in the last couple of weeks is that in Bill 9921, I think that prior to that bill, that these types of projects were exempted from the site development plan process under some catch-all language that had existed prior to that. I don't think the intent was to ever take out these types of projects from that, but inadvertently it was discovered that they weren't actually exempt from SDP anymore. So now this specifically exempts those projects from the SDP.
That was my bill.
Correct.
I had to go check. I was like, 9921. I'm like, that sounds familiar. So, all right. I agree. The intent was never to touch this kind of thing with that bill. So that's interesting. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 10.
Amendment number 2, right?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, just making sure I didn't miss
Amendment
something.
number 2. I'm sorry. Yes, we're on
Miss-
1023. But yeah.
Miss Rodvian.
Aye.
Miss Ledbetter.
Aye.
Miss Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Miss Hummer.
Aye.
Miss Fiedler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 2 has been adopted.
Awesome. Bill number 1023 will be heard on March 20th, 2023. All right. Got one more. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 1123.
Bill number 1123, an ordinance concerning zoning, mixed-use districts, uses under the optional method of development.
All right, Mr. Barron?
This is a council member bill.
Oh,
We support, though.
good Lord. This is, 623 took me out. I'm telling you. It took me out. I'm sorry, Miss Hummer and Miss Pickard.
So, do we need a motion first? Or I don't know.
Well, no, it
First
says
one?
go to the sponsor for a few discussions.
Okay.
So,
Bill 1123 just transfers certain permitted uses allowed in mixed-use districts from the retail and service or other categories to the office or industrial categories. Currently, there are inconsistencies within the code that some businesses are listed as one category for zoning and another for impact fees. For instance, a veterinarian is listed as retail for zoning and office for the impact fees. So veterinarians and opticians will now be classified as office, mailing and shipping stores will be classified as industrial, and a more general other category will be listed as industrial. And this will just allow the county to more consistently and accurately track the true nature and purpose of types of businesses in mixed-use areas, and I ask for your support.
all right, admin.
Well, I spoiled it. Joining me at the table is Ms. Miller and Ms. Kenny. Obviously, the administration mentioned at the work session we support this. I do want to thank the sponsors for working with us in the drafting of this bill to make sure we got the technicals right, and we support.
Thank you. Can you please include me as a sponsor of this? I do have a larger question. I was at the work session, the regional planning teams that they had this weekend with Region 2. And as we were deep diving into sort of land use and tagging different, or proposing at least the team that was in place, one of the discussions that came up was these potentially expanding categories of mixed use. And I saw the chart. I did read the chart, like what's permitted, what's not on that spreadsheet. And it made me think about future sort of discussions about mixed use categories, at least from this regional planning perspective, and looking forward to probably sitting down with you just to talk about what at least I uncovered in that meeting, and some of the members that would probably enjoy speaking with you as well. So yeah, certainly in favor of it. We will now, any further, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also like to be added as a co-sponsor and motion to adopt.
All right, we will now open the public hearing on bill number, is there any? Oh, no, it was, No, not yet.
Oh, sorry.
For the amendments, but we're not amending it. It's already submitted. Just for a point of order.
Did I miss that?
I think you heard her say the motion to adopt earlier. 623, I'm blaming 623. So any further discussion? All right. We will now open the public hearing on bill number 1123. Madam Secretary, did we receive any testimony through the online testimonial tool?
We did not receive anything ahead of time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I don't see anyone that has signed up in advance. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak on bill number 1123? All right, seeing no movement, the public hearing on bill number 1123 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 1123.
Bill number 1123, an ordinance concerning zoning mixed-use districts, uses under the optional method of development.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing no lights. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on bill number 1123.
Ms. Radvian.
Aye.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Ms. Hummer.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 1123 has been passed.
All right. Is there any other business to be brought before the county council at this time? All right, seeing no movement, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The county council is adjourned until 9 a.m. on March 14, 2023 for a council work session. I know that. That's